Did you know? Goblins are one of the most ubiquitous creatures in Magic. They have been with the game since the very beginning and have almost seen an appearance in every set. One of the first creature lords to be introduced to the game was Goblin King. Printed in every base set starting in Alpha all the way to 10th edition, this Lord of the Goblins has gone through several different iterations. At first, his creature type was Goblin King. Then in 3rd edition, it changed to Lord to not give itself its own +1/+1 and Mountain Walk buff. When 9th edition released, Goblin King underwent another creature type change. This time, Goblin was added, making him a Goblin Lord. The rules text was also rewritten to say other goblins get +1/+1 and Mountain Walk. This officially made it where Goblin King can give other Goblin Kings +1/+1 while preventing itself from receiving its own bonus. Finally, with its very last printing in 10th edition, Goblin King's creature type lost the Lord tag, leaving it as Goblin. When core sets were revamped with Magic 2010, the Goblin King was replaced with Goblin Chieftain. This new Goblin Lord still gave other goblins +1/+1, but this time it would only be goblins that player controls. Another major change that came with yearly core sets was the removal of a complicated combat ruling called Damage on the Stack. When Damage on the Stack existed, it allowed players to assign their attackers and blockers combat damage to be put on the stack. This meant players could cast spells or activate abilities after damage was assigned and before damage would be dealt. Because of this ruling, many creatures with non-tapping activated abilities were very powerful. One among them was a goblin called Mogg Fanatic. For a long time, Mogg Fanatic was one of the best 1-drops for any red deck thanks to its activated ability, which reads, Sacrifice Mogg Fanatic. Mogg Fanatic deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Because of damage on the stack, Mogg Fanatic was a very versatile 1-drop that would frequently kill opposing 2-toughness creatures, 2-for-1 2/1/1s, and even deal a damage to an opponent before killing an opposing 1-toughness creature in combat. Because of its versatility, the little guy was a prominent creature in practically every red aggro deck of every format imaginable. Unfortunately, when the rules changed, Mogg Fanatic got much worse. Today, the Goblin does see some play, but it's not nearly as prevalent as it once was. Perhaps the most popular Goblin character in all of Magic's lore is Squee. Introduced in the artwork on the card Call of the Wild from Weatherlight, Squee was also featured on the cover of Inquest magazine. Squee was one of the original crew members of the skyship Weatherlight. For the uninitiated, the Weatherlight was a storyline that lasted 13 sets. Many of the characters in this saga had official cards printed, including Squee. As the first legendary goblin, Squee Goblin Nabob immediately saw play in Standard as endless fuel for Masticore, a popular artifact creature at the time. In Vintage, players started seeing Squee's potential for card advantage in decks with Bazaar of Baghdad, but the format Squee excelled in the most was Extended. Cards like Survival of the Fittest from Exodus and Solitary Confinement from Judgment worked extremely well with the Goblin Nabob, since Squee would continuously return to hand to then be discarded over and over again. Because of his many synergies in several different formats, Squee was one of the most sought-after cards in Mercadian Masks. Today, Squee is no longer played in competitive Magic, but he is fairly common to see in Commander. Another legendary goblin that has seen a rise in popularity is Kiki-Jiki Mirrorbreaker. From the get-go, Kiki-Jiki saw play as a tutor target in Tooth and Nail decks during the Mirrodin Kamigawa Standard. However, after Champions of Kamigawa rotated out, the Mirrorbreaker fell to obscurity. Several years later, when Commander became a format, Kiki-Jiki started seeing a slow comeback. But his big return truly came in 2011 when the first modern Pro Tour debuted. Thanks to Samuel Estrati, who piloted a blue-red Splinter Twin combo deck to a Pro Tour championship, Kiki-Jiki was back on top. With Pestermite and Deceiver Exarch, Kiki-Jiki and the deck's namesake became the main parts for the Infinite Creatures combo. In 2012, Birthing Pod decks began to dominate Modern. One of these Birthing Pod decks used Kiki-Jiki with Restoration Angel as a way to win with Infinite Angels on the board. As a major component in 2 of the best combo decks in the format, Kiki-Jiki was the most valuable red card after Lightning Bolt in Modern. However, the legendary Goblin's glory days slowly faded away when combo decks with Birthing Pod were banned in 2015, followed by Splinter Twin a year later. Fortunately, as is the trend, Kiki-Jiki is still very popular as a general or a combo piece in Commander. From 1997 to 2004, World Championship decks were a supplemental product that featured the best decks from Magic's most prestigious tournament. One of those decks was Wolfgang Eater's Goblin Bidding from Worlds 2003. A deck containing nothing but goblin creature cards and a handful of spells, it was the first ever goblin tribal deck to succeed in Standard. The deck's success hinged on an aggressive start, and if a board wipe like Wrath of God or Mutilate was cast, the sorcery spell Patriarch's Bidding would reanimate all goblins from the graveyard back into play. Usually when this happened, the game was over if Goblin Warchief was one of the reanimated creatures, giving all goblins haste. To most players, goblins are known as a great tribe to play in competitive and casual formats. However, there were a couple of goblin cards that were literal bombs in draft. For starters, there was Sparksmith, a 2-drop common that would beat out most rares as a first pick in Onslaught draft. Sparksmith would dominate the battlefield by pinging away any 2/2 just by having one other goblin by its side. This scenario was fairly common since Onslaught was the first set to introduce 2/2 morph creatures. Onslaught was also a very creature-focused block, with goblins being the main tribe for red. So first picking a Sparksmith was a no-brainer, as picking up more goblins in later packs was a simple task. Another limited format all-star came in Mirrodin, the block after Onslaught. With equipment being introduced for the first time, Spike Shot Goblin was the perfect creature to test the potential of these new artifacts. Starting at 1 damage to either a creature or player, the goblin could then increase its damage output by 3-fold from a measly Bone Splitter. Tack on more equipment and the game would be won solely on a buffed up goblin creature, which was fairly easy since equipment cards were bountiful. One of the most polarizing cards in the game is Steam Flogger Boss, a 3/3 goblin for 3 generic mana and 1 red mana. The card's rules text reads, "Other rigger creatures you control get +1/+0 and have haste. If a rigger you control would assemble a contraption, it assembles 2 contraptions instead." As a card from Future Sight, its primary purpose was, quote, "to be a card from the future," end quote. Many cards in the set had a unique card frame and several new mechanics were introduced, which was all meant to depict what the future may look like for Magic. However, the Steam Flogger Boss had a different goal. Mostly conceived as a joke, Magic R&D never had any intention to make contraptions or the term assemble work. Unfortunately, Magic R&D's attempt at humor didn't go over well with the community. The reasons were pretty clear, as the Goblin Rigger was practically useless since no other contraption cards or riggers were in the set. But the biggest problem was its rarity. At Rare, many players excited to open a booster pack would get a Steam Flogger Boss with rules text that didn't make any sense. Disappointing, to say the least. Despite its many shortcomings, Steam Flogger Boss has a cult following, and there was much debate as to when, or even if, contraptions would finally be introduced. However, that changed when Mark Rosewater revealed Steam Flogger Boss to be in the latest Unset, Unstable, at this year's San Diego Comic-Con. With Steam Flogger Boss officially returning in Unstable, it is assured that we will finally see how contraptions truly work. Whew, that was a lot on goblins. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but luckily there are many more interesting stories to tell in a future installment of Did You Know Magic? This episode was voiced by me, Jimmy Wong. If you enjoyed this episode, then you should check out my podcast about Commander at youtube.com/theCommandZonePodcast and on Twitter @CommandCast. You can also check out our gameplay series, Game Nights, where we take the multiplayer format in all its forms and play it in a professional and fun setting. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again.